Hello, everybody. My name is Nick Quinlan, and I am here broadcasting from MLH and INIT. We are so excited to have you today. Please, if you have not already checked in, go on to Organizer or onto the event page and go check in. I'm posting a link right now in the chat to make sure you check in to get points for your guild. With that started, though, let me introduce you to what we're going to be talking about today. We have a phenomenal group of people that I'm joined by on stream here. And they'll be bringing their incredible knowledge and opinions and thoughts and experiences and journeys to you as we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion in technology. As we're continuing to grow as a society, and it has become much more broadly clear how important it is for us to recognize how people are treated differently because of who they are, and we were recognizing that we must make changes to the ways that we live, work, and interact to make a society that works for all of us. Because this is such a broad field and everybody is so unique. There's a ton of intersectionality and a lot of things that are affecting each other. Broadly, what we're going to be talking about today is referred to as diversity, equity, and inclusion. And there's a lot of it. So we're going to be hearing from a lot of different diverse perspectives and experiences, and hearing both about where we are and all of the ground that we have yet to cover as we make a more broadly diverse, equitable, and inclusive society. Today, we've gathered folks across the technology industry to speak about both their personal journeys and where technology can go. I am so excited for you to meet these folks. They are absolutely incredible. I was thrilled when I learned who I was going to be speaking with today. And so I'm going to ask them to go ahead and introduce themselves. Lisa, can I start with you and ask you to introduce yourself and tell everybody who you are?
Get that unmute button working there. Hey, I'm Lisa Fowler-Zelig, and really happy to be here. I'm currently a production engineering manager at Facebook, and my focus and passion is on user trust and safety. So I work with the teams responsible for building privacy infrastructure and integrity or counter abuse infrastructure. Just really happy to talk about this topic, live through this every single day of my career in tech and even before then. So happy to have this discussion. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. And Billy, can I ask you to introduce yourself as well?
Sure. So hi, I'm Billy. I'm trying to switch on my glasses because these are turning into sunglasses. I'm Billy Jacobson, also known to many online as Analytical, a coding drag queen. I create lots of fun coding tutorials and lessons and talk a lot about LGBTQ plus issues in tech through that. But that's my side gig. And during the day, I work at Google as a developer relations engineer on the cloud platform.
Incredible. And Dennis, tell us about yourself.
Sure. I'll give you the abridged version because, I have a long extended history, but I am the executive director of the Blacks in Technology Foundation. We are the largest community of Black technologists globally. We have 44 chapters and 15,000 members in 8 countries. That is my side job. I'm a volunteer. My day job, I work for HPE in customer success as a customer success manager for their GreenLake product. And I've been in the industry for about 24 years. I've worked at Dropbox and Gartner and Samsung and Lenovo and Dell and some others. Yeah, that's me.
Incredible. Thank you all so much. As everybody on stream can see, we have some incredible people here who have some really wonderful perspectives to bring. I'm going to be your moderator today. I'm Nick Quinlan. I'm the Chief Operating Officer of Major League Hacking, who you might know is hosting a INIT. As we go through this, I'm going to be asking the panelists questions, but if you have questions for the panelists, please put it in the Twitch chat, the Facebook chat, whatever streaming platform you are on's chat. And we might be able to ask them it towards the end. So please make sure you're asking those questions. But I would love to start and just ask a question to for each of you to answer. And that's really a question about kind of where we might be going. When you're thinking about diversity in tech, what do you think we can create? Like maybe not that end goal, but like with this deeper focus on building a diverse, equitable, and inclusive field, like where are we going? What are some of the things that you're hoping for, both in your work and in the work of technologists as a whole, but what that technology actually does as well? And Lisa, we'll start with you and we'll kind of loop through.
I'm going to answer this in a kind of sideways way, because as I mentioned, I really care deeply about privacy. I care about user trust. I care about the human experience of technology, just all throughout. I work at Facebook, social media company. So all these topics are real important. From the privacy perspective, why do we care about this? We care because there are so many people affected by our platforms, and everyone has something unique that they're caring about, that they need to keep private, vulnerabilities that they might have, anything that someone else could exploit or push or just abuse in general. We don't want to have too much information about ourselves out there. I think every one of us has something that we want to keep private. So around those notions of privacy, we have to, from a technology perspective, do everything we can to protect those most vulnerable. And I think looking at this lens of inclusion and diversity, it means thinking about a whole world, a whole culture, a whole everything perspective in tech. You don't want to build something that's going to suddenly expose some secret about someone else. And we all have these secrets. So I think we're seeing the technology evolve, we're seeing the thinking evolve, and privacy isn't just about being able to say share or not share. It's about honoring really the human characteristics we have, and that we also need to cover this across all different aspects, from just every single thing that's about us. So it's slightly sideways from what you were asking, but it's something that matters deeply to me.
Very cool. And Billy, tell me when you're thinking about this world, what are some of the components that you think about?
Yeah, so my platform is kind of made on the idea of like if you don't take part in building the technology around you, then you won't be represented in it. I create a lot of content in order to get people to see that coding is something that they can do and engage with and kind of learn and see different pieces where there could be an impact to you. So one instance I call out a lot is like really bad gender forms that will give you just options that either don't make sense or aren't inclusive. Facebook's actually done a very good job of this. I think Facebook was one of the early companies to kind of lock that down in a good way. Then there are other places beyond in like machine learning and showing how you could create like very easily a biased machine learning model. Or I know a lot of the cloud companies, including Google, we had the auto pre-built machine learning models where it could detect if you were like male or female. And I think last year or maybe 2 years ago, they've been removed from pretty much all the major cloud providers, that I think is great. But I also like to show it's like, yes, I want people to be able to learn how to code, but I also want to show there are so many different ways that you can have an impact on technology without coding and making your voice heard in that way. So like the Human Rights Campaign has put out several great guidelines on like social media and like gender forms and a variety of things that tech companies can leverage to do better and accommodate and embrace more people in the space. And also kind of in my day-to-day, like I work on kind of like these very infrastructure-y things that aren't necessarily the most, they don't have like a ton of personality where you might experience things like discrimination. So I think there are kind of ways that you can think about it even if you're in a sort of area like that. So I have mentored like several LGBTQ plus team members on my team. We've got like a group chat, which is great to just make everyone kind of feel welcome. And also we create a lot of code examples. So making sure that those are interesting for a more broad audience and showing different kinds of examples can be acceptable and show that they're really cool. I mean, with my drag, I show that you use makeup as your examples when you're teaching code. And I think that shows a lot of people like, oh, you can take anything you love and bring it to this space.
Incredible. Thank you, Billy. And Dennis, I'm curious to hear your answer as well.
Yeah. So my prism is slightly different, but not too far off from Billy and Lisa's. But basically, we want to see more representation, racial representation in tech. Our mission is to, see more Black faces, or at least that's my personal mission. And the macro of that is one of unemployment and underemployment. We believe tech is a vehicle to, help solve a lot of the, issues with Black unemployment, and also wealth building and distribution. I mean, there's a lot of money in tech, and a lot of folks shy away from it because they don't either understand all the potential specializations and roles that are in tech, or two, they think they have to be a math genius or a math whiz. And, as Billy mentioned, you don't have to be very technical to work in tech and to build a strong career. So that's kind of the lens that I look at, things through. And hopefully, we can work towards that.
I just want to add on, Dennis. I mean, that's so great, but it's like the same thing in the LGBTQ place. There are so many queer people who experience homelessness, and especially the intersectionality of Black people, LGBTQ plus people. It's like there's so much opportunity there to like lift, show these people and show our communities that we can lift each other up in this specific way.
Great.
And I'd love to dig into that a little bit more, right? We're talking about these opportunities to lift up communities. And I think that what I've certainly seen is that there are a number of barriers that stop that. Societal barriers, as we're talking about, access to technology, and even having that ability to learn that, hey, you can be a programmer is something that is oftentimes kept from people who have typically been marginalized in society. Can you speak a little bit more to some of those barriers that you've seen, and some of the ways that, people are starting to overcome those, or ways that the industry is starting to work towards reducing those? That's a generalized question. So
I'll jump in first if you don't mind. So for me, I mean, I see there's as far as barriers, I mean, there's different, when we break down technology, you have entrepreneurs and startups, and then you have what I consider traditional IT workers. And if we're talking about the traditional IT workers, they're organizations that are trying to define the problem and work towards solving it. So, organizations like Blacks in Technology or Black Girls Code, who will focus on, early age learners and say, okay, these are the basics, these are the fundamentals. And a lot of times it's hard to focus on STEM and STEAM when, you're working in an educational system that doesn't, give you the basics, let alone the extras. And a lot of, public schools, unfortunately, focus on STEM and STEAM as extra or something additional, and not as core curricula. So I think, that's starting to change, or at least there's visibility given to it now, and there's organizations that are filling in those gaps. But I think that's probably one of the biggest barriers. And the second thing is financial. To get certifications and to go to conferences and to network costs money. So, we're trying to figure out ways to bridge that gap too, and come up with ways to supplement or, provide scholarships or grants, or, just give money away to people who need it, quite frankly. So if there's a financial barrier, part of our mission is to help alleviate that.
Very cool. Very cool. Any other thoughts? Before
one there, and I guess it's kind of continuing off of Dennis again, is like, I think you mentioned it's not just coding, and it's like I really think anyone can code and kind of get the basics down. I don't think anyone could be a software engineer, because I think some people just don't like it or don't connect with it in a specific way. But I think showing people that you can code, and then showing all the different pieces of the puzzle in creating something, because it's not just the people that are coding that are creating something. There are product managers, technical writers, user interface designers, user experience designers, researchers. There are so many different roles, which I think are great fits for people who don't see themselves in technology. And it's a great place to take part in building that technology. Like, I feel like there are so many people who don't view technology as a creative field when there are so many aspects you can bring creativity into it. Just designing all different applications in terms of like all the little buttons and how things look on different screens, and figuring out color schemes and all of that. And then there's also the almost human and empathetic side of the user experience of understanding what the different kinds of people that are coming to your program are, or your application, and how they're going to use it, and giving them a good experience. And that's actually something I think is a great area for people that don't feel like they fit into tech, because they have the empathy and that ability to come in and say, oh, there are all these other people that we need to consider. How are we catering towards them? And that really matters when you're at scales like Facebook and Google, when you're dealing with over 1 billion users. You want to make sure it might just be, you might think, oh, it's a small percentage of people that this applies to, but that could be 1 million people. That could be 10 million people.
Billy raises a really good point in here. Many, many good points about Dennis as well. One of the things I love about today is that the technology and kind of the friction of technology getting there has been reduced pretty substantially. If you look, there's so many online classes that you can take, and toward Dennis's point, we still have a divide. We still have an ability for people to get online and like actually dedicate the time, and there's challenges and friction toward getting there. But the fact that you can just go online now and learn a whole bunch of things, or that the technology has advanced so much that you don't need to understand all the underlying things to build the next game. Right? Like, you've got really fantastic engines out there that you can just use now without having to build a ray tracer from scratch. So like we're getting into that state where Billy's talking about, where you can shift into the different layers of technology, that it's almost irrelevant that it's tech. It's more, what are we creating now on this base platform? And that really is very exciting. The concern that I continue to have around being able to lift each other up, and like, absolutely, we need to lift each other up and open doors, not close doors on people, but open those doors and lift them up. But once they're in, how are we nurturing them? How are we nurturing them, keeping them there, and making sure that they're able to thrive in all the different ways possible, and across all different skills, abilities, cultures, backgrounds, everything, because we need that diversity. Like Billy said, we're representing billions of users, billions of humans using our platform, and a bunch of robots too, but also really the humans. And we need to be designing for that inclusion. Yeah.
And I can just tack on that the low code, no code movement is phenomenal. And it just, shows that you don't have to be super technical to, make an impact in technology. As long as you have the right idea, you can, develop a, product or platform or service. And diversity is something that we have to be intentional about, because if you're not, then, things can go awry unintentionally. And it's easy to not think, I need to, make sure that my form has pronouns, or I need to make sure that we, our AI, can recognize Black faces, like the coded bias documentary that just came out. So things like that. I mean, it's not necessarily an intentional, byproduct, but if you're not intentional from the beginning, things can go off the rails pretty quickly when you're dealing at scale.
Yeah. And that brings me to another really interesting question that I think each of you have touched on in one way or another. And I think Billy said this really well. Like, if you're not in it, you're not going to be represented in it. And I think that that's something that we've seen time and time again in this world, where, if somebody if there aren't Black people writing AI for facial recognition, they're not going to be recognized in it. And there's a whole lot of reasons, most of them structural, that they haven't been represented in that. But I'm curious if you can speak a little bit more towards how having diverse groups of people creating technology, whether that's as a coder or as a product manager, all those various segments of technology, how that can create those better products.
I kind of want to follow up again on the inclusion thing that Lisa was talking about, and then we could go to that. I just think that this is like the one of the biggest things right now is like getting people in and then keeping them. And I think it's hard right now, especially since there's just such a small percentage of certain groups of people. I think it's like Black people, especially at some of these large tech companies, there's still like a really small percentage, and it's hard to kind of feel that sense of community. I felt fairly lucky at Google, since there's such a large Pride cohort, and even on my team, we have such a large group of people. So I think like it's easy to be able to find those groups. And I also think it really depends on the kind of thing you're working on potentially. It's like I'm working on things that aren't necessarily a little bit more technical and not as like decision heavy or like personality driven almost, where I think there can be less conflict in some instances. But even just like having a common language to communicate with people and having common communication styles and understanding things in the way that you're communicating could be affecting people. I was just seeing this article on Twitter popping around about like the toll that code switching is taking on a lot of people from having to work at home. And that's like something I hadn't even really considered as much since I kind of work alone in my apartment, so that helps a little bit. And I feel like I'm able to bring a lot of myself to work. But I think that's definitely like a big thing. It's like there's this huge thing that I didn't even consider or know about, and it's like that's potentially affecting a lot of coworkers or affecting a lot of people beyond just the issues of having to work from home and those close quarters.
So I just had a great demo of that.
Yes.
Yeah, so we had a little surprise guest. But you're right, the whole work from home thing really has exposed more of our like broader selves to our coworkers, maybe some things that others didn't see. And in some senses, I think it has actually been helpful. I've seen so many parents holding babies in meetings now, and I've had multiple meetings with just fathers and their babies in a crib nearby, and just seeing that and having those types of things be norms is really fantastic. When I had my first kid, I really felt weird in the organization that I was in because no one was taking parental leave. Like literally one dude took a day and was like, I don't want to hear the baby anymore, and went back to work. And that was a choice he made and was acceptable with his partner, that was okay for him to just come back to work. But that was the norm. And if I was pregnant and looking for taking time, like taking a full maternity leave to be with my kid, was that going to be okay in that environment? And I think the more that we can be authentic, the more that we can be open across all of our different needs and constraints. And those needs can also just be, I like to take an hour walk and just kind of not do other stuff. And the more that we can be open about those different journeys, about the challenges that we have, everything else, then I think it does make it more inclusive overall, because others can see that there are examples of people who are able to take more time or balance the rest of their lives, if it's children or pets or hobbies, whatever it might be. And I think over time it is getting better, and work from home has, I think, shifted some of this forward for some of us.
Absolutely. And, component of that I think is a wonderful segue, and I appreciate that, is that Dennis has to run for a minute because he has other parts of his life. So I want to recognize him. He'll be back very shortly. But before he runs off stream, I do want to just give you the reason for that. as we're continuing, so thank you, Dennis, and we'll see you back here very shortly, hopefully.
Thanks, Nick.
So as we continue to talk about, how we can normalize people from bringing more of their lives into work and sharing more of themselves with their coworkers, what are some of the other, I guess, components that need to be in a workplace beyond those norms to allow for a really diverse group of people to work together well and feel included?
So, like, I went on this thing about being able to be authentic, but at the time before that, I also said we have a right to be private. So I think it's a very—
Both can be true.
I think it's a very interesting dichotomy, right? Like, you need to be able to have aspects of your life that are private. I have major aspects of my life that I do not bring into the workplace, and that's fine. I think we need to have that ability to choose where we're being, but for the things that you cannot choose, the things that are really about you all the time, things that are visible from the outside, or maybe things that are invisible but pervasive throughout your experience, we have to design for, not only from a product perspective, but from a corporate perspective, the people who might be the most vulnerable. And that means small tweaks like shifting to unisex bathrooms, right? Like, you just don't have to worry about it. Just, there's a bathroom. No need to have a label to enter a certain door. Those types of things where you're designing and making decisions for the most vulnerable, it actually helps everyone, and it helps everyone in all the different cases. There was a question on the chat around people having a harder time accessing privacy practices and that, like, and controlling those things. This is, again, comes back to that, which is design for the most difficult, the most marginalized, the most vulnerable, and then we're going to help everyone. And we have to bring that in both from a product design perspective and from a corporate experience perspective.
Yeah, that's actually, I think there's often this misconception that, like, doing these specialized things is only for this small set of people, but it will end up helping everyone. I think I was listening to this design podcast. I can't remember which one it was. I think it was 99% Invisible, potentially. And they're talking about ramps on sidewalks and how it's like, those are designed for wheelchair users, but there are so many other people that helps. It's like if you're carrying your luggage around, or maybe you have a walker. I mean, if you have a walker, that's kind of in the same boat, but there's just so many little things, or maybe you have a stroller. It's like there's so many things that can be helped by any of these little changes. And one privacy issue that comes to mind, I don't know if this is relevant to any of your discussion, but it's kind of an interesting privacy example is with a lot of like gay dating apps. They will give you kind of like a grid of people, and they'll say how far away you are from them, but they'll give it in like feet. So you can basically, you used to be able to like you could walk in the triangle and like triangulate where everyone was based on that information. And you're giving away people's like exact address in there, which is fairly dangerous. And then also in certain areas where like it's illegal to be out or illegal to have any like homosexual acts, people like authorities would be more easily able to like locate people. So there's so many different like aspects of privacy and different levels, and figuring out like how to make that work.
So this is a perfect example of why that diversity and inclusion matters, because you bring people in with different perspectives. You bring people in with different risk factors that maybe the predominant culture that's in the room is not going to be aware of it. Right? Like as somebody who's maybe not yet come out, there are these vulnerabilities. You don't want your search queries as you're exploring what does it mean to be yourself to then be exposed to everybody. You also don't want to, if you're a woman in an area where there's more sexual violence, you also don't want to, like, what does it mean for you to be on a dating app? Are you going to get stalked? How can you control all these things? And so the more that you've got diverse perspectives in the room, the more that we can make technology, make our living experiences so completely intertwined with technology, safer and just better for all of us. We have to get those diverse experiences. And neurodiversity is a question that's coming up on the side as well. Like, we have to consider the whole person, the things that are external, the things that are internal, and the experiences that we are all living.
Absolutely. And as you're talking about the, having these people in the room, I think that obviously none of these challenges are going to be solved just on an individual basis. This is societal. This is on large corporate structures basis. But as you're doing it on a personal level, I'd love to shift to both of you and ask, like, what are the things that each of you do in your work to promote like that more diverse, inclusive, and equitable tech sector, so that the folks on our panel, or sorry, watching the stream rather, can start thinking about ways that they might incorporate those into their lives?
What's the question?
Thanks for taking that, Billy.
That was a poorly worded question. What are some of the ways that you?
No, it's okay.
What are some of the ways that you two promote a more diverse and equitable and inclusive work environment on that individual basis? And hopefully people can hear those examples that you bring into your own work and take those into their own jobs as well. So does that make sense? I can rephrase again.
I mean, I can just talk. Like, I'll just say things I think are new and hopefully helpful for people. I think one of my biggest things has been kind of creating this content as analytical. I think there isn't a lot of like queer and technical tech representation that I've found. I think there are a lot of like, there are the events like Out in Tech or Lesbian to Tech, and I think those very quickly veer out of the territory of being technical. And I don't knock them. I think like they're doing great things, like helping a lot of people connect. But I think there's less discussion about some of these issues that do affect things technically in tech, or people who are working as software engineers and are LGBTQ plus. It's like, what are those experiences and why aren't we talking about them? Or how do we get more of those people into tech? And I think with LGBTQ plus people specifically, it's actually one of the harder things, because I mean, you could correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like this is one of the things that is less measured by companies. I mean, I know some companies have started measuring it, but it's also much harder to get in the recruitment process. So I think you can ask people's gender and race or ethnicity like anonymously throughout that chain. I don't know if that's changed, and that's also it's something that is a little bit more fluid than some of those other. Well, I guess it falls into that category as well. So I think that was kind of something for me, where it's like I wanted to bring the technical aspect to LGBTQ plus people, and also kind of do it the other way around. Like, there are some amazing tech content creators who do things that are kind of more, I guess, more off the beaten path than your typical like pets or Star Wars or Star Trek or Cars examples. So I love kind of getting to join them and celebrate the work together. Like bringing in drag and makeup has been really fun for me. And it doesn't just, it connects with more than just LGBTQ plus people. There are so many women that connect with my stuff as well, which I really love, because I think drag can be a celebration of women. And there are so many amazing like women currently computing and throughout the entire history of computing.
From the work from home angle, one thing that I found has been pretty cool that I would love for us to keep, going back to the point about barriers, I don't have a barrier to travel anymore, to go to a conference, to speak and participate and interact with more people. there's not so many of us women in like senior leadership in technology, and to have the ability to just instantly from sitting here, going from coffee in the morning to just sitting here and speaking with so many of you who are interested in this topic, and then it is phenomenal. That is removing a barrier. I have children. It is hard for me to travel. And I have to really consider which conferences I go to over a year. And now I've just been able to do panel after panel after panel, which is really great. So removing that barrier from work from home has been, I think, pretty helpful. Fostering inclusion. I'm a manager, and I'm a manager because I love to help people grow. I originally thought I wanted to be a college professor so that I could help open doors for people, and specifically like not a professor at a school that was amazing, but kind of a low middle space where I could help people be excited about technology. I've translated that into being a manager and trying to help people and connect with them. So this is where I feel like I try to bring in the inclusion lens more, which is in one-on-one conversations with people and truly listening, getting to know who they are as individuals, no matter like where they are as a person, but connecting with them individually, not saying you need to be loud and extroverted, you need to be a hyper technical person. Maybe your skill set is in connecting people and bringing together wild ideas and innovating. Maybe you're a product visionary. Let's lean into that. Let's work on that. Let's come together and find a way to find you a right path in this industry. So that's how I foster inclusion on an ongoing basis. Work from home has made a lot of this more challenging, for sure. It's harder to connect with people. And then it's also harder in big meetings, big group discussions, to be there with a person. You generally will have the loudest person speaking in a group VC, and then everyone else is silent. And then how do we make sure that everyone is a part of that, has a way of contributing and a part of that? So some pros, some cons, and some things that I think are still true all the time, which is connect to individuals. Don't just assume from the outside.
That's phenomenal advice. And as we're thinking a little bit more about like that individual basis, I'm curious if either of you have advice for somebody who's navigating tech and not being from like that dominant archetype in tech right now. Like what kind of advice would you give somebody who's just entering technology or just entering the workforce as somebody who comes from maybe a little bit of a more diverse perspective than just, the standard, person in technology?
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think it's like you either find somebody who is kind of similar, has a similar experience to you. You're probably not the first going through a lot of this. If you're at a larger company, there are probably tons of like employee resource groups that you could engage with. But I also think there are tons of conferences and opportunities to meet with folks like yourself if you're coming from a background like that, if you don't feel like there are people like that at your company. And I think also a good point to make is if we have people watching this that are have been in the workforce for a little bit, is like find ways to give back. And there's so many different ways you can do that. My way has been making videos, and that's really fun for me. And I like to give talks and kind of be out there, and I'm able to reach a lot of people. But even if you're able to just find one person you could mentor, or go with your company to a hackathon, we're doing this with Major League Hacking. It's like, see if your company would let you go to like a local hackathon for a day and help out. That could be a way. And also just being visible, just being like, if you want, it's like there also, all of this is kind of with the caveat of like, if you're kind of feeling like you're comfortable in a place and have the capacity to kind of bring everything to the table and have the capacity to go and help other people. I think sometimes even just like being yourself and getting your stuff done is enough. And I guess for people, and then for people, the kind of people joining the workforce, I think, like try to just find a person to connect with, and commiserate together, celebrate together.
It is
together.
It's hard, right? Like sometimes you are actually that first person. And that kind of bootstrapping problem is pretty major. But I think one of the things that's nice about where we are today is that you do have companies that are leading in this, like Google and Facebook, about talking about psychological safety, talking about inclusion, having reminders in meeting rooms like, are you being inclusive to the other people that are there? More education is out there. But that standard doesn't exist in every company. And you can join microcultures within these big companies where it isn't as inclusive. And the one big warning that I have for folks who are in any of these minority sets is watch where you are with it. Like, check in with yourself. Are you having to put up with too much? Is this an environment that you feel like you can thrive in? And if it's not, look for another one. Because sometimes you are that only one. Maybe sometimes that environment is not one that is going to help you thrive. Find one that will. If you are, one of my privileges is that I'm a major dissenter. Like, I don't mind. I will just dissent and like speak up for whatever it is that I believe is the right outcome in the room. So throughout my career, I was okay being the only woman who wasn't like white in the room, anything. Just I was the different one in the room for year after year after year. And I was told to my face, you do not belong. You do not belong. You are not technical. I need to speak with a man. And to have that, at least for me, I was okay carrying that burden and continuing to prove them wrong that I did deserve to be there. But for everyone else, you carry so much. You carry things in your day-to-day lives. Choose what you pick up. And maybe some of those places you don't have to, like, don't fight. Find a different place, because we are at a state now where companies are being more aware about what inclusion means, and you have different ways. And I want every individual to thrive. It's important that we have more and more people in this industry.
Yeah, and I think there are so many opportunities where it's like you can go to conferences or reach out to people online. And I think that's one of the great things about the tech communities, that I think people are very willing to help. Like, you can reach out to people with thousands and thousands of followers and they will reply to you and help you out. So I think don't be afraid to ask for help, especially if you're just joining a company and feel like unsafe or unwelcome. I think people are willing to help you out and help you figure out the next steps. Even if you feel like you can't quit for financial reasons or whatever, like, I feel like people will be able to help you out and get you to a good place.
Yeah, super, super great advice. There was another question that showed up on the side, which is advice for students just starting out. And I think, to Billy, what you're talking about here is you're not alone. There's like, we all come from a unique and individual place, but there's the internet has connected us, and you can find different ways of not being alone. And hopefully some of those barriers that prevent you from accessing different companies, different roles, now we're allowing a lot more remote. So more of these options, remote work, more of these options are starting to come up. So fight for yourself and what is right for you, and don't just say, like, I got to take that first thing that is here, and I owe it to the company that I just stay here and put up with all this crap. No, it can be amazing. I love my job. I really love my job. It's taken me a lot of friction to get to where I'm at, but now I have influence and people that support me and empower me and elevate me in different rooms. So keep on fighting for what's right for you, and it will come. And reach out. There are people who care, who want you to be successful.
Wow, Lisa, so well said.
I just read you.
Yeah. I also wanted to say, it's like, for your first job or your first year, it's like, try to learn as much as you can and really try to find excitement in the work. I think my first year at my job, I felt very lost. I had no idea what was going on. I was kind of terrible. It was probably the first 6 months, and it was like I really felt like I just don't know how to do anything. And I think like I just needed to find the enjoyment that I had when I was like learning code and starting to code. I needed to find that in this kind of huge space. And I think figuring out the right questions to ask of like, how can I learn this thing? So like, I don't know what's going on. What are some of these areas that I should like sit down and like really dive deeper on so I can understand what's going on? And once I think like psychological safety in terms of just your personhood is good, but also like feeling safe in terms of like the things that you're working on is also really helpful. Like you're wherever company you go into, you're going to be working with a set of tools totally different than what you've done before. And figuring out a way that you can really like connect with all of those things and then feel like, okay, now I've got all my tools ready. I can build and like keep going and feel like I can be productive. And then you can kind of also figure out like, what is your career path then, and yeah. And it's like, it's okay to like mess up for a little bit and figure out how to like get back on track. That's the point of what I was trying to say.
Those are such phenomenal thoughts. I'm going to ask one final question of each of you, which is really, if you have closing thoughts to this conversation, if you have things that you feel like, you know, you want to make sure are said, or things that you want somebody to come away from this panel hearing from you, what are those things? What do you want somebody to know and have learned and taken away from this? And we'll start with Billy.
I think there's no like one thing to take away from these kinds of discussions. The thing is just keep having these discussions and keep listening. I think I've been hearing things about being your authentic self at work or your diversity and inclusion. I mean, it's these conversations have been going on I've been hearing them for over like a decade now, or almost a decade. I don't know the exact timeline. But I think the conversations are constantly growing and changing, and you are all constantly growing and changing. You're going to have to figure out like, where do you fit into this space, and where do you want to have an impact, or where are these things going to affect you, and how can you like make things happen? In terms of my advice, maybe is I just started making videos on YouTube and was like, I want people to learn how to code. Let me show them. And I think there's so many places where you can just get started on something small and see where it grows. You don't have to feel like things have to be perfect. Like if you want to learn to code, just start with an intro class, or go on to like free code camp or something. There's so many places to just do a little bit. And I think that's the best piece of advice, whether you're learning to code or you're trying to get more diversity and inclusion in work. It's like, start with a spark and then keep moving forward. But kind of don't let that flame go out. Keep having those discussions, keep challenging yourself to learn, and keep listening.
That's incredible. And Lisa, I'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, again, like Billy said, I don't know that there's one thing you can really share to make sure that we've got the right message. But the one part that I like to keep in mind is that this really it's a whole story. It's a whole story of both opening that door, working on the pipeline, making sure that people have the opportunities to just get in there. But once you're in, making sure that people are fostering them and growing and thriving within that space. We also need to make sure that we're elevating everyone else behind us. Like, this is an ongoing journey, and I continue to be inspired by the women pioneers and in technology. I love to go to every single one of these fireside talks and hear how they've persevered through time, because I learned from them. I learned from their journey. So remember where you are in it, be a passenger where you can be, get the advice, get the support. And then once you are feeling stronger, give back and keep going, because we need to continue supporting people, modeling, and being a part of making sure that we've got everyone represented in this industry, and that we've got something that is really just truly inclusive and lets us build great products.
Incredible. And Dennis, I'd love your closing thoughts here as well.
Sure. I just say, be the change you want to see in the industry. I mean, any industry is made up of people, and it's only as good as the people who comprise it. So as you develop your careers, as you move forward, think intentionally about, what you want the industry to be like, what you want it to look like, how you want to challenge both your employer, but the industry in general. So as you get strength and power and influence within your role and within your team, and you will some influence, make sure that, as Lisa and Billy both said, you're looking back and helping others, because I think the humanity in tech is sometimes lost. We need to make sure that we're developing good people, not just good products and applications. So that'll be my takeaway. Make yourself more well-rounded and help others.
Thank you all so much. I am leaving this panel feeling excited and hopeful and having learned so much. So I so appreciate each of you spending your time with us here today. Finally, we have all the folks and contact information for them in our event page. So please check it out. And for those of you who are tuning into INIT and here for the whole time, coming up right after this, we have a leaderboard update. So please tune in. We'll be going live very, very quickly just after this. Stay on board, and we will have Ryan, or Totally Not Ryan, and Mary here to talk about that very shortly. But I want to take 1 second and thank you all panelists, Dennis, Billy, Lisa, so much for being here with us today. It has been a really phenomenal discussion.
Yeah, it was so great to meet Dennis, Lisa, and Nick. It was great to meet everybody. It was so fun. Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you all, folks. And thank you, everybody, for joining us as well. Happy hacking, and we will keep on going with INIT.